natural overtone series, if I have a main frequency for pitch, it has secondary frequencies that are produced at the octave and then the fifth. And so the connection between, like if we were using solfege, between do and so is the strongest connection that there is. Do, re, mi, fa, sol. In fact, when they first started doing music, like in the Middle Ages, they would do like a chant. They would be like, Hallelujah. And then when they decided to do something else, because that was boring, they did it to the fifth. Right? And so they parallel fifth all over the place, right? Or else they would do below, which would put if you went down, right? So you have fifth above or fifth below. Anyway, that is one of the first, like, earliest kinds of, I don't know, you can't really call it harmony, but it was like the beginnings of harmony because of that really strong relationship between a pitch and the fifth on either side of it, okay? So that's why our key signatures are all related to each other, and the series of key signatures is related by fifths. So if I go up a fifth, I get the next key with the next sharp, and I go up another fifth, the next key with another sharp. If I go down a fifth, it's a key with the flat, and then I go down a fifth from there, I get a key with two flats, and so forth and so on. And then you always end up going back where you started. Okay, that makes sense? So the circle of fifths you do need to know. Let me just go over a couple other things on your basic outline. So music is sound that is organized in time. That's a little definition they wanted you to know. You know that pitch is a sound wave and it's a particular frequency. Instruments are a ways to make those frequencies, those sounds, right? The only instrument made by God is the human voice. And so that's a natural instrument, and it can do everything. And man-made instruments are a little more restrictive, right? Pitch frequency, you know, and an octave is where the frequency doubles, right? So that A440, if I play an octave above that, so this is A440, and an octave below, that's A440, this is A220. So every time you double the frequency, you're an octave ahead. So what they did in the beginning of starting music is they took an octave and they just divided it up into 12 little bits, right? So there's 12 half steps within the octave, and that's how they came up with the system that we use. All right, you know what scales are, right? See that thing on the board over there? That's a scale, right? How do you know it's a scale? Or is it just a bunch of notes that I threw up there?
The notes each go up by a half step?
Exactly, actually not a half step, but they each go like from a line to a space to a, I'm sorry, a space to a line to a space to a line to a space to a line to a space to a line, consecutively moving up the staff with no gaps in it, right? If I left that out, now I have a gap because I'm going from a space to a space. Or if I do that, now I have a gap. But if I'm going from a line to the very next space, to the very next line, to the very next space, it's some kind of a scale, right? And when I determine which scale this is, I look at the key signature, and in this case there's no flats or sharps, and even that would tell me that that was in the key of C major or A minor. And even though this doesn't start on a C for a C major scale or an A minor, it's still a C scale because I don't have any flats or sharps in this series of pitches, so I know that I'm in C major. Depending on where I start, remember that scales are patterns of whole steps and half steps, right? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a G, and from G to A is a whole step, and from A to B is a whole step, and from B to C is a half step, and C to D is a whole, half, whole, oops, sorry, whole, half, whole. And the pattern of a major scale is whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So if I start my scale and I end it there, I have a major scale. But guess what? If instead of doing that, because that's the order of whole and half steps I need for a major scale pattern. If I'm gonna do a minor scale pattern, I need this pattern. I need whole, half, whole, half, whole. If I do that, I get an A minor scale. Same set of notes, completely different sound. Here's C major. We know that, right? You guys have all sung that in choir 1,000 times. And then do, ti, la. If I started on la instead of do, I get la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, which is a minor scale. Same exact notes. The content of the major scale is of C major is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. No flats or sharps. But if I go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, it's the same pitches. But because of where I started, those whole and half steps end up in a different place in the series, and it makes it sound completely different, right? So where you begin the scale makes a huge difference. Right? Do, mi, do, fa.
Yeah, it's the space between two
Yes, an interval is
pitches.
the distance between two pitches. If you're counting intervals, you always use the note on the bottom, count that as one, and then count through the scale until you get up into the upper note. So if I have do to la, that would be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, a sixth. If I have fa to high do, I would have fa, sol, la, ti, do. It would be a fifth. Right? So always start with the one on the bottom and count up until you get there. So those are intervals. There are what we call major intervals, minor intervals, diminished intervals, and augmented intervals. You just need to know, I think, what those terms are. So major is just like normal. And minor means I shrink the middle, like that. And then diminished means I shrink the middle and the top. And lower, I should say shrink, lower the middle and the top. If I go back to the major, so I have a big third on the bottom, and then I'm going to have a big third on the top too. That's augmented. Right? So major is a major third on the bottom and a minor third on the top. Minor scale, I lower the middle, so now I have a smaller third, minor third on the bottom, and a major third on the top. And if I lower the top as well, now I have a minor third on top of a minor third. It's diminished. If I have a major third, and I put a major third on top of that, it's augmented, right? You don't have anything other than that, right? Major, minor, diminished, and augmented. And on intervals, so I can have like a perfect fourth. Here, surprise, that's a perfect fourth. If I sharp that top note, I just augmented it, made it bigger. Augmented, and now it's an augmented fourth, right? It's also known, that particular interval is also known as a tritone. You should know what a tritone is.
The devil's tritone.
The devil's tritone, right, exactly. Because do, so, it's a perfect fifth. There's no more perfect interval than that, right? Do, so, is perfect fifth, and do, fa is the next most perfect. That's also a perfect fourth. So the tritone is either a flatted fifth, which is a diminished fifth, or an augmented fourth. So it falls smack dab in between the two perfect intervals, and that's why it's so dissonant, because your ear doesn't know which way to go. It's like stuck in the middle of two perfections. It's like, ah! So that's a tritone, so you should know that, but they might ask you something weird about that. I just want to talk quickly about what we call the musical elements. So in music, when you talk about music, you evaluate music, and you consider all the musical elements, all the factors that make music what it is. So right off the bat, we have melody. And melody is just the pitches that you use. Are they high pitches, low pitches, and how you arrange it. It's melody, right? And if I have, the melody is the main theme. And if I have another tune, but it's not the melody, it's probably functioning as a harmony, right? And so melody and harmony, they're both related to pitch and the way pitches relate to one another. So that's a musical element, so melody and harmony. I also have to know how long to hold each of those pitches, and that's what we call rhythm, right? The duration of pitch. If I have those beats, and I know I'm going to hold some notes for a longer number of beats and some for a fewer number of beats, that's how I create different rhythm patterns, but it's all within the context of what we call meter. So that's another element. So I have melody, harmony, and then I have meter and rhythm. So melody and harmony kind of go together, and rhythm and meter kind of go together. They're all related, right? And then you have other things that you're going to talk about, like texture. I can go over texture with you guys. So if I have one song, I'm going to sing, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. Mary had a little lamb. It sings as white as snow. There's one melody. There's nothing else going on. There's no harmony. There's no accompaniment. There's nothing. That is what's called monophonic texture. Mono meaning one main sound. Right?
Yeah, we did this back before state. We covered that before state.
All right. So if I do this, Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb. All kinds of notes going on there. That's no longer monophonic. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? And so that is all basically, so if I'm going, Mary had a little lamb, I have harmony in one melody. Little lamb, there's harmony in one melody, so that's homophonic. So even though there's other notes, those notes are supporting one melody or the same melody. So it's homophonic, right? So mono means one, homo means the same. So monophonic, one melody, nothing else. Homophonic means one melody, but it's supported by other stuff. But then, if we did it as a round, or if somebody else sang a different song while we sang that, and they happen to kind of mesh together, it would be polyphonic, because I'd have multiple melodies occurring at the same time. So even if it's the same melody, like row, row, row your boat, because it's happening at different times, it's functioning as two separate melodic ideas, and now it's polyphonic, because there's more than one melody to listen to. Your ear is distracted. Polyphonic music is the most difficult to listen to because there's a lot of stuff going on, right? And there's also chordal homophonic. That's when I'm like playing those block chords. So like a church hymn, like all the music that we talked about in those songbooks that they used for this era, right? Those songbooks like, what's his name? Billings wrote, right? The songbooks and psaltery. Those were all chordally homophonic, right? Texture, because there's one main melody and they all sing in chords. All right. And then other things with rhythm. We talked about syncopation before. You guys know what that is when you're singing on the offbeat. So instead of Mary had a little lamb, you get Mary had a little lamb. I'm jerking on the offbeats, right? So Mary had a little lamb. Everything's on a beat. But syncopation is Mary had a little lamb. I'm on the offbeats up here, right? So that's syncopation. It's used always in jazz. It's like one of the hallmarks of jazz style, but we use it, I mean, it occurs in lots of different kinds of music. We use it all the time. But spirituals and jazz and blues will always have syncopation in it. All right. So also back elements of music are like keys, right? And dynamics, you know, dynamics, that term, you remember what that means? Right? Changes in the loud and soft, right? Yeah. Tempo is the speed of the beat. Those are other musical elements, and you guys pretty much know that. All right, let's talk more specifically. I'm going to play you some songs. What do you think about that? So, when you guys were in middle school, did you ever do the Virginia Reel square, like part of square dancing unit or something? No?
We did square dancing at state.
Did you?
Well, line dancing. Sorry, we did a lot of line dancing at
That's
state.
kind of the same thing. So reel, R-E-E-L, is a kind of dance. Keep in mind, nobody like freestyle dance back. They didn't do that. Yeah, they didn't do that until I was like in high school. So we had like in the 1700s, if I was in Europe during this time period, they would do, their favorite dance was the minuet. Minuet, it's a 3-step, so it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It later kind of evolves into what's called the waltz, right? So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, right? So waltz is still a very, very popular dance. Nobody does a minuet anymore, but like a minuet, if I was dancing with a partner, we'd face each other. God forbid we touch each other. Sometimes we would have a hanky in between us, and you'd like step together and back, and that was like wild dancing. So the minuet was super, super popular, and sometimes we would have a whole big room, like a ballroom in some place, and they would line up the ladies on one side and all the men on the other, and you'd start doing your minuetting, right? And then maybe you turn, and then you move into the next position, and now you have a different dance partner. Maybe the guys move this way, the girls move that way, and so you end up with a different partner. So that gives birth here to folk dances like square dances that you may have done before, and the reel, R-E-E-L, is one that was kind of a popular dance. But the song that I'm going to play you is called Lady Hope's Reel. It's from 1757. Let's see. Lady Hope's Reel. Here we go. Let's see what we got. So notice the two things that you heard right there at the beginning. What'd you hear? Listen again. You hear two things. A fife, F-I-F-E. I'll look up a picture for you in a minute. So a fife is like a military flute, if you will. And you hear the dum dum bum 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 bum. That's a snare drum, right? You know what a snare drum is? So I can show you one. You don't need to see it, right? And so keep in mind, we had a lot of military stuff going on during this time period too, right? The American Revolution was the big thing. So they had what was called a fife and drum corps, which is kind of like today we have a drum and bugle corps, right? So drum corps, you have snares, dun, 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 and then bugles, right? But at this time period, they used a fife and a drum. So a drum keeps a beat, right? So if I have a bunch of troops marching and I want them to march in time with one another, so they're not like bumping into each other and stuff, I'm going to use my drum to keep that beat steady. And the fife, just to keep it from being boring, but the fife can also be heard over great distances because it's high pitched, right? So in the military,
that's why the Americans started using guerrilla tactics against them, because they could hear them from quite a ways. So they
well, they used to use it for communicating to the troops. Yeah. So you can hear a fife from pretty far away. So if the whole area, if you've been using your muskets and you're blowing up muskets all over the place in the battlefield, it's filled with smoke and you can't even see 10 feet in front of your face. And so they would communicate, and they would have different signals that they used through the fife and drum to help communicate to the rest of the troops. So the other thing that I think is interesting is, so if the American soldiers wore dark blue with maybe red lapels or red interior as a jacket, the drummer and the fife player would have the opposite. So that, not so they get confused with the redcoats, but so that the general could find them easily and be like, hey, you need to send this signal, right? So the music in the military, this is the beginning of military bands, was to keep the troops sort of in line and keeping them stepping together, but also to send communication to, you know, the troops that are over here, or if the troops get separated in the battlefield and that kind of stuff. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway, back to the reel. So the reel is a popular kind of dance music that you do at the town hall on a Friday night in your little community. But this is called Lady Hope's Reel. And this is actually a military military tune. This is from 1957. You can't miss that. You have to march. There's no question about whether that step, and it's always going to be about the same tempo because that's a marching tempo, right? I'm not going to get out of step. I'm not going to slow down and drag. It keeps me moving. It propels itself along. And it's not really a lot of fun to listen to, right? All right, so that again is called Lady Hope's Reel. All right, I am going to, let's see, fife and drum corps, using communication. I told you about the reverse colored uniforms. I'm going to play you another song that you're responsible for. This is just a plain old folk song. Folk songs, so folk songs are songs that are made up by people. They typically tell a story, and they're typically told in verses, which is called, remember I talked to you about this before, strophic form, S-T-R-O-P-H-I-C, like a stanza of a poem is also called a strophe. So strophic form in music is just verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, however many verses I need to tell a story. So like, oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, I was lost and but forever, oh my darling Clementine, that's verse 1. Well, she was lost and not forsaken, I don't know the rest of the words, but that'd be verse 2, and then she's got big feet and big ears, and I really love her so, or whatever the words are. But every verse tells another little piece of the story, but exactly the same pitches, right? Same rhythm, same pitches. There's some alteration in the rhythms just to accommodate the difference in text, right? So that's typically how folk songs are, and they're just made up. Nobody sits down and composes a folk song. It's just made up. So I had something tragic happen to me, like this particular folk song that we're going to listen to. The guy is getting ready to get married, and he's out in his farm field, and he gets bit by a rattlesnake, and he doesn't make it back in time, and he dies. It's a tragedy. And a lot of folk songs are about tragedies. Some of them, like Oh My Darling Clementine, Clementine dies. And this is a tragedy, but some of them are just like stupid and kind of funny, right? It just depends on what you're using it for. But folk songs are very, very popular, and they're not composed. They're sort of made up, and they're passed on within a community of people. So if I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, like Timothy Myrick, the guy we're going to talk about, everybody in Springfield, Massachusetts would know the story of Timothy Myrick. But if I go to Portland, Oregon, they don't know anything about Timothy Myrick or what happened to him, and they're probably not going to know that particular folk song either, right? So folk songs tend to be regional. So like we've got French folk songs from France, and Italian folk songs from Italy, and German folk songs from Germany, and we've got lots of American folk songs, but they're also regional. So what might be popular in the South isn't going to be popular in the West or the Northeast. Okay? What?
Yeah, my one cousin basically made up a folk song.
Really?
It's
Is it worth
called
hearing?
The Song That Contradicts Itself.
Yeah.
I'll tell you it later.
Okay, sounds good. Anyway, so the song that we're going to do is called Springfield Mountain, And it was written, it says after 1761, because that's when the guy bit the dust, is 1761. And so what happened is this guy named Timothy Myrick, M-Y-R-I-C, as I said, he was from Springfield, Massachusetts. There's some discrepancy in that, because I went and I looked to find more information, and he's definitely from Massachusetts, but which specific town is kind of up for grabs. Again, it's folk music, it's just passed on by word of mouth. So nobody documented it. So Timothy Myrick, he's from somewhere near Springfield, Massachusetts, and he's engaged to be married, and he goes out and he's in the farm field near Farmingham, Massachusetts, and he gets bitten by a snake, and he can't make it, a rattlesnake, and he can't make it back in time to marry his sweetheart. And so the song is called Springfield Mountain. And I found this other thing, it said something about chicken on a raft. But anyway, we're going to listen to it. This is considered to be one of the oldest folk songs of all time. And I'm going to play it for you. It's also what's called a ballad. You guys know what a ballad is?
Mm-hmm.
Yes? What's a ballad?
It's like a song that is to someone else. It's like a soliloquy, but music.
Okay. Yeah, so when we think of a ballad today, we have like up-tempo songs, which are fast and lively, and we have ballads, which are usually slow and pretty. But the actual meaning of a ballad is it's a song that usually tells kind of a heart-wrenching story, right? So there are a lot of cowboy ballads, and maybe they're not super heart-wrenching, but they tell some kind of a story.
Adele.
So that's the idea of a ballad. You what?
Adele's entire discography.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. All right, so this is considered to be one of the very oldest ballads ever. I want you to listen to this.
When you get your next big idea, say sparkling ketchup.
On Springfield Mountain there did dwell a likely youth, was known full well, Lieutenant Cushman's only son, a likely youth now 21. One Monday morning he did go down in the meadow for to mow. He mowed around till he did feel a poison serpent bite his heel. When he received his deathly wound, he laid his side down on the ground. To return home was his intent, crying aloud long as he went. His voice was heard both far and near, but none of his friends did there appear, thinking that he some workman called. Poor boy alone at last did fall. It was 1761 when this sad accident was done. May this a warning be to all, to be prepared when God does call.
And there you go.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't know.
On Springfield Mountain.
we don't need to listen to
I
that.
didn't know what you were talking about when you mentioned this, but as it started going, I started noticing that I've heard at least part of this before.
So what I want to point out is this particular version, it's harmonized in
It's a minor key.
so it's the interval, there's a parallel parallel intervals. So the harmony, if you will, is separated by perfect interval, by either fourth below or fifth above. It depends on which way you look at it. And that interval stays the same through the whole song. So the upper part and the lower part move like this. Ya da 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 ba 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 ba, and the other part stays the same. So it's always equidistant harmony, for lack of a better word, right? Today we sing and we love parallel thirds, right? But early. So that's like this song. So you've probably heard gobs of songs like this because right now sea shanties are really popular, right? You guys know Wellerman?
Yeah. Well,
Right?
then,
It
yeah.
has the same kind of harmonies in it, and it's from that same era. And it's because if I'm gonna harmonize and I don't know squat about music, I can easily find the fifth. Or I can easily find the fourth because of that whole relationship with the whole perfect interval thing, right? So anyway, this is about, the name of the song is Springfield Mountain because he's from Springfield, Massachusetts, so that should help you remember that. And it is considered the oldest American folk song from one of the collection of oldest folk song ballads. It's about the death of Timothy Myrick, who was bitten by a rattlesnake, and you know the story, okay? All right. Remember I talked to you guys, or no, I didn't talk to you about, or maybe I did, about the Moravians, and I put it in those notes that I posted online for you. Remember that?
Sounds familiar.
So, can you tell me anything about the Moravians?
It sounds familiar, but I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, so originally their founder was Czech, I believe, and then he had to kind of move around, and he ended up, so it's a German-speaking group of people, and they ended up coming to the United States, and they settled around in Pennsylvania, in what's known as Pennsylvania Dutch country. Also a little bit in like upper New York, but that same sort of northeast kind of woodsy area. And they're German-speaking people by the time they got here. So initially in Czech, but the group kind of moved around and got pushed around. And when they came over to the United States, they came over here for religious freedom, and they spoke German, and they settled, and they were farmers, and they were also very, very musical. I remember the codex that we talked about. You remember that? The Ephrata Codex. And so I talked about the three different settlements. There was the Ephrata and the Harmony and I forget the name of the third one. There are three main settlements of the Moravians. So this is a song of the Moravian people, and it is sung in German. And let me make sure I got this spelled right. Die sanfte Bewegung, I spelled that wrong. Die liebliche Kraft. And this is by Sister Pröben, who would be one of the Moravian women.
Yeah, the Ephrata Codex contained the first female written
Yep.
works of music.
And let's see, here it is. Let's see what we can find. Let's listen to it. Oh, that's
One of the best baseball players in the world go head to head. Their fans cheer harder, pushing them to play.
Anyway, I think you get the general idea. So what texture would you say this song is?
Homophonic.
Yes, because there's one main melody, but I hear other notes. And it kind of moves in blocks of sound. You feel that? It moves in by chords. It's not like woven. And so it's chordal homophonic, which is what's used for what? Hymns. So this is a hymn tune for Moravian people. All right? And it's sung in German because that was the language that they spoke. It was written by Sister, what's her name? Sister Föben, who would have been one of their female members of the Moravian community. I'm not sure which community she comes from because I didn't do research on that. But anyway, that just gives you an idea. So if they played you that, you would be able to recognize it, right? And you'd be able to say, boom, Sister Föben and Moravian, and it's in German. And it's also strophic. I don't know if we listen to enough of them for you to know, but it's like most hymns are also strophic, right? Like, joy to the world, the Lord has come, let earth receive his King, right? And then he rules the world with truth and grace. Second verse, and no more let sin, right? So every verse makes it strophic. So all the verses are the same. So this is no different. This is the same thing as a church hymn, essentially, of the Moravian people. Good. We're going to talk briefly about music of the African Americans, and this is. Whoa. So we are talking slavery, right? And I don't know, that's a sad here. This is it. Look at that. Oh, that's Springfield Mountain. Let's see. So we listened to Springfield Mountain. We haven't heard that one yet. Where is, we heard the Desanfre. We heard Lady Hope's. Here's this one. All right, I'll listen to the one that, oh, it's Spotify. I don't think I can get in.
Is Spotify still blocked on teachers?
No, I don't think I have Spotify.
Oh.
I have to sign in? I don't know. I don't think I have a thing.
You want me to use mine?
Can I just continue with Google? Maybe that'll work.
Yeah. Oh.
No, it's not gonna work. All right, well, anyway, so basically we brought tons of slaves over here, right? We captured them in Africa, we brought them to the United States so that they could work in the plantations in the fields. And Africa had very complex rhythms, right? And not particular like musical structure. So what you get with African music that came over with slavery was a lot of what's called polyrhythms. So like if I were to go, and then you go ba-da-da, 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 while I'm doing my rhythm. Those rhythms don't mesh at all, right? They don't like flow together at all. But I can do layer, 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 and I get lots of polyrhythms, which like splinters beats into not just like a quarter note gets split in half into 2 eighth notes, but splinters it into thirds and fourths and fifths and sixths and sevenths and eighths, because the rhythm patterns don't necessarily line up. Very, very complex rhythms. Also, mostly vocal music, right? Because typically there wasn't much wealth in much of Africa, and so you always have your voice with you. And so lots and lots of vocal music, vocal singing tradition, which fits in right with the times here, because there's a lot of vocal music when we come over to the United States and we're worshiping in our like community church and all that kind of stuff. So we got a lot of vocal music, and we might have some complicated rhythm patterns which help us feel syncopation, which we talked about before, right? And that is honestly where syncopation kind of moves into music in the United States, is because of the Africans that were brought here with their own very complex music traditions. Also, there's becomes a popular thing called call and response because of what's known as a field holler, right? A field holler. The angel of, whenever you do that, when they do that, the angel of, the angel of, the angel of, it's called imitation. It's a musical thing that happens all the time. It's like echoing, and it's just like a round, right? When I have that, it's not monophonic, it's not homophonic, even though we're all doing basically the same melody, we're doing it at different times. That's polyphonic music. And you hear it, and you hear it, and you hear it, and it's distracting, right? So polyphonic music is very complex, right? So that's an example. The angel of the Lord came down. This is a hymn, but it's done in homophonic and polyphonic. Let's see this. Hear that? Chordal.
Chordal homophonic.
Chordal homophonic. Can you hear the language? It's German. So it's Moravian.
Okay, I can sort of hear that now.
So you hear that, you're going to know that it is Moravian.
As he went,
You know what this
his
is.
voice
You've heard
was
it.
heard both far and near, but none of his friends did there appear, thinking that he's some workman called.
And this is the Hope's Reel, right? Lady Hope's Reel. And I know that because I hear a snare drum and I hear a fife, and I know it's military, right? All right, so again, back to music of Africans that have been brought to the United States. They've got nothing to bring with them except for their voices and themselves. And it's a huge, horrible life for them. They're slaves, and many were beaten, killed, hung, all sorts of terrible things. And so typically, music of slavery is music which, if it's rejoiceful, because some of it's up-tempo, right, like spirituals, that was worship music of the slaves, and it was meant to be uplifting because life is terrible. And when I think about the afterlife and what that has to offer, that's something to rejoice about. So most spirituals always talk about crossing over the River Jordan, and that's symbolic for crossing into the afterlife, or the promised land, right? This is the promise from God, and so it's like this new Christian faith developing in these people. They're looking forward to the afterlife because their life here on earth sucks so bad. And so they're hopeful. However, they do have mournful songs, which are kind of crying songs. And then they also have work songs. And typically a work song would have, like I said, call and response. You've got a group of people working in this field here and a group of people working in this field here. And so they would sing and they would answer and they would sing and they would answer. It would be echoing back and forth all day long. It was literally just a way to kind of pass the time so that it was not as awful as it could be, right? So you had work songs, field hollers, and then we have this, which is a woohoo song. So here is a woohoo song. Not that. This is still the end of the reel, which is the pipe and drum. There. Sounds mournful, sounds like I'm crying.
Mournful, syllabic, monophonic.
And a lot of sliding.
Yeah. Vowels.
It's just a minor third.
Yeah.
Do, me, re, do, me, re. It's the first three notes of a minor scale. Da, 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 da. All right. Next is going to be Native American music, which is a whole different thing, but some similarities. This time you're going to feel a nice steady beat, right?
Yep.
Always. And so you're going to have lots of percussion instruments, but they're Native American percussion instruments. So snare drum doesn't exist, and any other musical instruments that African Americans may have brought with them. In fact, a banjo is actually an African American instrument that came over here with slavery. And this is going to have Native American instruments, so think like drums, like toms that have like a skin head and an open bass, and rattles made from gourds and things like that, or maybe like a ring of hide that has like animal bones on it or something like that. So this is Ho Hey Yo, and it is your Native American music. Here we go. Use those songs for anything from celebration to communication to mostly celebrations, or maybe trying to healing, preparing for war, but they're always going to be group projects, right? It's always going to be like dancing in a circle while doing the music, and everybody is participating instead of just a couple individuals entertaining, right? So the group entertains itself. You can tell the difference between that music. So even though that's vocal with a drum, you can tell the difference between that and the vocal music of slavery, right? And the drum different from the drum and fife. You can tell the difference between all those things? Okay, I'm gonna post this website right here. This is, somebody put this together, and it's just all of the listening that you're responsible in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way down the line. So I'm gonna do this right now. I'm gonna post it in the link to this in that Schoology thing that I have. So you guys can find it, right?
This will be posted in the description as well.
Okay, because I want you to be able to do it, and if you've got the outline, do you guys all have the outline?
Yes.
Okay, so if you got the outline, these are posted in order, so you could kind of figure it out if you just listen through, but we've just listened through like the first 5 or 6 of them. Oops, sorry, you